Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, this week we will be discussing on marketing research. We have already have one lecture on marketing research. Today we will have another lecture on marketing research, and the topic of discussion is research design, data collection and its measurement. And for discussion we have in a studio Dr. O.P. Wali. He is a professor at Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi, and Dr. Wali has done MBA from Institute of Rural Management, Anand, and he has experience of about 20 years of both world academic as well as corporate world. And Dr. Wali area of research is research methodology, statistics and design modeling, and he teaches at of a student of postgraduate and doctorate level. So on your behalf I welcome Dr. Wali for the EduSet lecture. I hope his experience and knowledge will help us to understand the research design in a new perspective. So on your behalf I welcome Dr. Wali for the EduSet lecture. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So, good afternoon. What I have decided is that we will take the threads from the point where the last session stopped. Dr. Pandey must have talked about the importance of marketing research in decision making in the area of marketing function, and we got to take it further and see how we really develop an approach to solve marketing decisions, and what are the different steps to do that, and look at each step in much detail. And tomorrow then we will take up an example and practically see how we can really use particular tools to solve a particular problem through the approach that we will identify in the process. So what we are going to do today is we will look at four things. We will look at the agenda, I would call, is we will look at the importance of figuring out the context for the research problem, and how do we really develop an approach for the research design which is to be applied in the particular context, and how do we go about really collecting the data and information which will help us solve the problem, and what sort of measurements are used to collect the data, and thereafter the different steps that follow would be taken up in the subsequent sessions which will be taken tomorrow onwards. So to begin with, what happens many a times that people do research and they apply different methods and they come out with a kind of a solution, and that solution possibly may be right and it may be valid, but unfortunately it may be valid for a different question that is not really the question that they started with, or the question that was really desired to be answered. So it is quite important that we really understand the right question and the kind of problem that we are really addressing, so that there is no digression from the problem that we are basically trying to solve. So, so any research process that we really follow or investigate, we need to really be better aware about the problem that we are basically trying to resolve with the help of the marketing research. So, how do we really get more clear perspective about the research problem that we are investigating? Take the case of say retail outlet. You must have really heard a lot of research coming even in the newspaper media about the different bigger retail outlets, not only in India and abroad. It is a common phenomena. You will find a lot of descriptive analytics appearing in the dailies and the magazines, etc. They talk about the consumer behavior, they talk about the trend, the shopping behavior. All this is basically the research, but how do we are really going to use it, and whether it really applies to a situation, and how do they blend with your own research and try to address the problem that needs to really be seen. So, how do we really understand our problem our marketing problem or the decision problem that we are into. So we got to really start with looking around the problem and the context by talking to the experts who are there, the decision makers who got to really deal with that particular problem, who are the stakeholders in that particular say issue or the opportunity or the problem that we are talking about, and also look at have a detailed look at the kind of say secondary data that is available with the company or the department. And most of the time we don't have really much clue about the kind of say dimensions of the problem. We may have to really explore the problem much further. We may have to see what are the different dimensions of the particular problem. So what we do something called qualitative research, where we really investigate the problem with a very open mind and trying to investigate and looking into the dimensions and tearing it out in terms of the different threads and what all it can really lead to, and what all really leads to what all different things lead to this kind of a particular problem. So this is something called a problem audit, which is quite related to when we are talking about how to really investigate the problem before we really embark on the marketing research process. So this has to be quite right. As I said, if you don't really get the problem right, quite possible that the whole research process may really end up answering a different question, not the right question. So looking at what are the different courses of action that are available to the decision maker, what events led to that kind of a problem that we are investigating, what sort of criteria is used to evaluate the different say alternative courses of action, what are the potential actions that are likely to be suggested, and what is the information needed to answer the decision maker's questions, the manner in which decision maker will use each item of information in making the decision, and of course the culture is quite important in any kind of a decision making. What really could be a good decision or right approach in one organization may not really fit well in another organization, depending on the culture, depending on the kind of protocols they follow in the organization across the hierarchy. So apart from looking into say the internal what we call the context of the organization, you got to really look into the external context of the organization as well, the decision problem, the issue that we are investigating, looking at the past information, the forecast, the resources, the constraints. Essentially constraints could be which are something which go beyond your control, which you can't really change, which are there to really follow. And what is the buyer behavior, the customer behavior in case of marketing, because customer is like the fulcrum of all our say investigation efforts. And the legal environment is what really regulates that particular place, the situation, the phenomena, the problem that we are really investigating, and what sort of skills are there. Skills are also a sort of resources that we are really talking about. That got to be really seen before we really get into the process of finding out how do we really go about researching it. So these are all important things that we really look into, understand before we really tread the path of the research. So a few examples like management decision problem, should a new product be introduced? The marketing research problem, if translated from the decision problem, could be to determine consumer preferences and purchase intentions for the proposed new product. So you see the difference. When we are talking about the decision problem, we are basically trying to address a kind of an issue or an opportunity. Then to really address that opportunity issue, we need to have some information. To get that information, we create a sort of kind of problem scenario for us, which needs to be really answered through a particular instrument or a survey or a group discussion or whatever method we choose. But the idea is there's a difference between the problem that we call as the marketing research problem and the problem that is the decision problem. But it is ultimately the marketing decision problem which got to be really resolved at the end of the day. So similarly, another example is, should the advertising campaign be changed? Maybe there's an advertising which has happened in the past which has not really effectively solved the problem of the marketeer. That means it has not really spread across the masses. There is no proper response from the earlier advertising effort. So marketer may really consider changing the advertising campaign as such. This is a marketing decision problem. Should we really change it? Now translate that problem into marketing research problem. So how would it really look like is to determine the effectiveness of current advertising campaign, and maybe if we really create some prototypes of the new advertising campaign, We may try to see the effectiveness of different messages that we create for the audience. Or we may also try to do kind of a research which channel we should really use if we decide to go through an say TV channel to reach the masses. And should the price of the brand be increased? Maybe there's a demand is escalating for your product, and you want to really see whether we can really leverage the equity of our product, of our brand. Can we really increase the price, or sometimes can we decrease the price? What do you really need to really investigate here? What is the extent of elasticity that the price will have with respect to the demand? Maybe that you increase the price or you decrease the price. Quite possible that it will adversely affect the demand, and that is what a marketer would be really interested in. Before taking a decision, you got to really see whether you are really doing it right or wrong, and seeing the implications of that particular decision. And if you are really investigating that particular path, that is why we are saying that is the area of marketing research problem, and which is different than the marketing decision problem, but it essentially emanates, it derives from the market decision problem. So, having understood the difference between marketing decision problem and the market research problem, it is quite important that while we will figure out the marketing research problem, we got to really make it simpler. Unless we make it simpler, it is very complicated to really investigate it. So, how do we really make anything simpler? We make things simpler by really fragmenting it, by dividing into the pieces which are quite understood by people who are in the process of investigation, who are there, and stakeholders in the process, so that everybody understands it. And then you can really formulate a program to really look into the components of that particular bigger problem. So, marketing research problem, one should have a very broader statement, and it should be disaggregated into specific components to make it simpler and manageable. And what are the components of an approach? Whatever approach we develop for the marketing researches, we need to really get hold of the theoretical foundation of the domain that we are talking about. So, if we have to investigate, let us say, a problem in the area of retail, if we have to investigate a problem in the area of, let us say, service industry, we got to really get hold of the kind of knowledge that is already built in that particular area by the researchers in the past. That is what we call as the theoretical knowledge, the theory that has developed in the past, the body of knowledge. So, how does it really help? How does the earlier knowledge in that particular area help a market researcher? It helps in different ways. It helps us to really identify the important variables, important dimensions of that particular problem. Otherwise, it will really take us a lot of time to really investigate and find out the dimensions. What we really lose is the time, and time is definitely money and resource. So, to really make it shorter and fast, it is quite important for any researcher that to get hold of the empirical studies, empirical research, theoretical knowledge that is developed in the past about that particular area, because it makes our process easier and our life more comfortable by giving us the kind of dimensions that are there already discovered by the earlier researchers, the kind of methods they have used in the past, the way they have handled this problem in the earlier research, the kind of problems they have faced, of course, to really do this research. Why it is really important? Because if you really don't look at that research, you may possibly repeat that kind of a mistake and end up not with a proper result and loss of resources. That is why the theoretical foundations are quite important in developing the approach towards the research. And then once you have really identified the dimensions, possible approach could be really developing an analytical model around that whole, say, set of findings. What I mean is that you have different dimensions, how those dimensions are really linked to each other, how they are related, associated, and how it is associated to the final outcome that we are really interested in. Maybe that we develop an analytical model around that and try to see how well this model can really help us resolve a particular problem. And having done that, a better idea is to really develop a list of the questions, research questions that we got to really answer to to get the relevant information which helps us to correct our guesses, to validate our predictions about the things we are investigating, or trying to really refine the model, analytical model that we have developed in the beginning. And otherwise one can even without having a model itself, one can really know more about the problem much better that you knew before really doing the investigation. So doing a model or predictive model, what we call, is really good, but there are certain researches where it is not necessary that you may really develop a model. You may really try to know more about certain things. What we call as a descriptive research may have got some idea yesterday also in the last session, sorry. And once we have this research questions listed which help us to provide the information to address the questions, to address the information that we need to solve our marketing decision, the next what we got to do is translate these questions into hypotheses. Now what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a kind of, say, statement that we are trying to prove, that we are trying to get evidence for, to support our claims, support our predictions, support our guesses. Okay, so normally we have say two types of hypotheses. We call something called a null hypothesis and something called an alternate hypothesis. Now one way of looking at the hypothesis that we are trying to get information in support of our claims, because we feel, let us say, the new advertising message that we have created is going to really get a better response. Let us say this is our market research question and we are getting information for that. We got some data and we develop a hypothesis around this kind of a question. Now we will try to really see whether we are with this particular advertising message is able to develop that kind of a response that we desire. And so the alternate hypothesis is there to really get evidence for that and validate that. And if we are not able to really get sufficient evidence in favor of our alternate hypothesis, possibly we will go with the original status quo, what we call as a null hypothesis. So this concept of hypothesis is very important in really reducing what we call as the errors in making mistakes, because what it really demands for is a lot of evidence in support of the claim that we are trying to make. Is quite a statistical concept. So people call it like what level of confidence you got in the whole say exercise, and some level of confidence how much evidence you got to really show to prove your alternate hypothesis or the claim that you are trying to make is what is basically the concept of hypothesis. But looking at it a much different perspective is, because normally what we do is any marketing research we try to really most of the marketing research we try to do with the help of a sample. Now if we have a sample and we are doing some analysis on top of that and got some output, and now we got to really validate it for the entire population or generalize it for the population that is of our interest. So the hypothesis that is there is a sort of mechanism to see whether we can really generalize the outcome which we got from the sample for the population. So from that perspective, hypothesis is just a way of really developing generalization on the basis of sample for the entire population. And the final thing that we got to really understand in developing the approach and the components of research design is that we got to really specify the information that we really need. What sort of data do we need? What metrics are we are going to really use to get the information, and how we are going to use those metrics to really suit the problems that are being investigated. We will look that thing in much detail later. And as I said, components of marketing research, you got to really make have a theoretical perspective which will help us to design the whole research process. It will help us understand the dimensions, the models are used, the instruments are used, and the findings that are there already established. And whatever we do with the help of the research is going to really add to that earlier knowledge that is there. Apart from really helping us as let us say we are a corporate, we are doing some marketing research, will help us solve our decision problem. But if we are really able to do some validated research in any area in the marketing research, we are essentially able to add to the earlier say body of knowledge in the marketing research. So, which is again useful for us as well as for the others to for the further use in the future. So, one example of really looking at the difference between the research question and how it gets translated into research hypothesis. Before we really understand through the examples, it is important to really define these two things so that we get a better perspective of the things. Like research questions are refined statements of specific components of the problem, whereas hypothesis is an unproven statement. As I was saying, the second perspective that we discussed, it is an unproven statement. It has to be proved. It has to be proved through evidence, right? And if we don't get the evidence, we go with what is the status quo. We have least grounds to really accept the claims or what we call as the alternate hypothesis. Take the case, as I was saying, an example. Do the customers of Sears is in retail outlet, retail chain, exhibit store loyalty? This is a research question. Now, how do we really translate this research question into, say, kind of hypothesis, which will help us later address the research question and in turn address the marketing decision problem. Now, what could be the marketing decision problem in this particular case? Now, one of the problems could be, let us say, one may really figure out that there is a decline in the number of customers or say repeat visits by the customers in say sufficient number of stores of the Sears group vis-a-vis say may possibly vis-a-vis the competitors. So, one may like to really investigate, because it is a question of concern for any marketeer. If your customers, number of customers declines, or the customers don't make repeated visits, or the number of products they may do repeated visits, but they are not purchasing the complete line of products they used to purchase earlier. So, you are concerned about the loyalty factor, because if loyalty is sustained, and possibly we may not really see this kind of a phenomena. So, a company may like to really investigate the loyalty factor, but actual decision problem is that should we really introduce some kind of an incentive to really enhance the loyalty factor, or should we decrease the price of our products, or is there a problem about the quality of our products, is there a problem about the range and say variety that is available in retail stores? That could be the marketing decision that we are really facing, but the research question is because of the loyalty factor is really affected, and that is why our sales are not really moving in the direction and moving the way that really we wanted. Now, having this research question, what could be the kind of hypothesis that we could really work for and investigate and prove with the help of any method that we choose later, suitable for the kind of say problem that we are investigating or the kind of data that we get. One sort of hypothesis could be the customers who are store loyal or less knowledgeable about the shopping environment. Like if you change now, make any changes if based on this hypothesis proven, and if you make any change in the shopping environment, like loyal customers, they are really least affected by that, and does it really help you to really address the basic problem that we started with? And second kind of hypothesis could be store loyal customers are more risk averse than our non-loyal customers. Like I will give you a case, because some time back I had also a chance to really work for a retail chain in Delhi. So, the company had a problem with the sales. There was sales decline happening regularly for 3-4 years. Then there was an investigation that was done, and marketing research initiative was started to find out why there is a decline in the sales. And the kind of say the research team that was taking the charge of the research started looking into aspect of that there is a huge competition around of say unorganized sectors, and they sell products quite cheap, and they sell they have more variety, and that is why the sales are really down. And this is what we really discussed in the beginning. They were trying to really look at the problem, look at research from without really looking at the research problem, and the problem if you ask me was something like different, which came to light later on, that The problem is decline in the sales, and how you really take it further is quite important, not being blindfolded by the kind of bias one has about it. So, what we realized later on, that the problem was about the quality of the produce and the products that were stored in the outlets, that really resulted in the decline in the sales. And why did that really happen? Over a period of time, the huge competition around affected the price of the retail chain, and because the price was affected, so the retail chain had to really constantly decrease the price and reduce its cost. So, there was a huge pressure on the cost. Once you have pressure on the cost, you naturally have to really tinker with the parameters which dovetail into the cost of the products or the produce that you sell. And finally, what happened is, because they continuously tinkered with the quality of the products and the produce, there was a huge negative kind of influence on the, say, loyalty factor about for the customers who used to patronize that chain of outlets because of its earlier quality that was maintained some years before. And this decline took a continuous spiral kind of an effect, and it happened over year after year, and the sales declined. But what I am trying to say is, the research team was trying to focus on something else. They felt that there is a huge competition, and competition is making the products available at a lesser price. We should reduce the price. Let us investigate the price part. If we reduce the price, is it really going to help the situation? What got to be investigated was, is really something else than the price, possibly the quality, that is really a reason for the decline in the sales of this company. And once that thing was brought in the perspective of the marketing research, and it was found out that yes, it was the quality that was not really tackled or taken care of in the last few years, and that has badly affected the loyalty of the customers. And having said this, the hypothesis in the first case, in the second case would be totally different. In the first case, it would be that if we decrease the price of the products in the different outlets of this particular retail chain in the market, am I going to be really affected in terms of my sales? Well, will my loyalty factor really increase? But if I do it on the dimension of quality, my hypothesis would be quite different, is that has there been a decrease in the perception about the quality of our produce or products among the customers that are in our target group. So, given the research question, there is a hypothesis, and given the research question, it has to really emanate from the right marketing decision. So, getting it right is very important from the beginning, and then translate into the kind of hypothesis that is relevant for the question that we are asking. So, the next thing that we got to really look at is having the design perspective correct. Depending on what we really believe in is quite important in any kind of a marketing research. If we believe in some kind of a research ourselves, we are confident about it, then we got to really follow that approach that we believe in. Sometimes we do a research, maybe we do a quantitative research, we apply certain methods, but we ourselves are not really so sure and confident about it, but we do it because we know there is a method and it can be really applied. What is really important is that we should have confidence. We should really believe in the approach that is being applied. Sometimes it may not be really quite logical or sound to really ask somebody about, say, how much you like something, how much you feel about particular things, which are quite qualitative in nature. And at that point of time, if you really go ahead with that kind of an instrument and the method and the approach and come out with a result, you have got a result, there is some finding well documented with some level of confidence, but frankly saying, you are not yourself, or the person who is doing it is not him or herself confident about the outcome. So, research design has to address this issue in the very beginning. That is, the team and the people who are really doing it got to have the faith and the confidence in the method they are really using. Having said that, the the set of components that are quite essential of any kind of say research, form a part of the research design, and got to be really followed religiously to be sure that whatever outcome is there is done through a scientific process, and then it is validated. Otherwise, if we don't really follow validated process, if we don't follow it rigorously and religiously, we may really use it, but it is not really going to be the part of the body of knowledge that we were referring earlier, because only valid knowledge is something which is which deserves to be there in the theoretical base or body of knowledge that we are talking. So, to begin with, the marketing research process and the research design that we are talking about, we got to really figure out the information that we need to handle the particular research problem, and this information is quite linked to the approach that we believe in, as I was telling you. And having said that, then you got to really follow particular processes, whether we really have detailed information or some level of information about the event or phenomena or the entities or the situations we are talking about, or we are totally new to the situation. If we are totally new to the situation, we may really have to explore it from scratch. And if we have some level of information, we may like to really know what is the status over there. And if we have a reasonable level of information, we would like to now go further to look into the relationships and the causes of different things that are there. That is something has really happened last 5 years, the phenomena which is now well investigated, established, a lot of body of knowledge has been already developed. So, having said that, people may like to really investigate now into the relationships between these various say dimensions which are there, or we call it variables. And once the approach is decided, whether you want to follow a descriptive approach, whether you want to follow exploratory approach, whether you want to follow say causal kind of an analysis or say research, it is quite important that we get information for that, because it is information that is required to really do any kind of an analysis. And information, depending on the kind of analysis we got to do, whether we want to do some qualitative analysis and we want to do some quantitative analysis, whether we want to do a causal study, whether we want to do a descriptive study. So, accordingly we got to get hold of the data and way to really measure the data, so that we can really get the information in the format, in the model that is desirable for the kind of analysis we are talking about. So, specifying the scales or the measurement of the data that we really need for the analysis is quite important in any marketing research initiative. If we are interested in say let us say knowing the basket of products that a customer would like to purchase from a retail outlet, how frequently they purchase it, what sort of value they really spend on these particular products, and what sort of combinations they really purchase from the retail outlets, we got to have all this kind of information, and we got to have some way of really capturing this information. Because unless I have some way to really capture the quantity and the value of the products, I cannot really figure it out by any means, and can't really conclude for that part of the analysis. What I will best get is that what products have been purchased from the retail outlet, not the quantity and value. So, what I am saying is, depending on what I really have to really decide in the marketing function, what is my research question, and what information would really address my research question, I got to really get information on those particular metrics to really be compatible with my kind of research approach. And there is another thing that is quite important when we are talking about getting the information about the say dimensions or say the entities, phenomena. We also call it say sometimes the variables that we are interested in. We got to understand that certain variables are there which can be measured directly. Let us say we call profit is a variable which can be measured directly. You can look into any transaction data of a company and can figure out what is their profit, what are the sales, what are the different say employee details. These are directly measured variables. But in lot of social sciences research, marketing research or say behavioral research, we don't have any means of directly measuring certain things. Let us say the motivation, let us say somebody what I say leadership, competence. These are the kind of variables you would like to measure. You may have to ask sometimes 5 questions, 10 questions, 20 questions to get the every aspect of that particular dimension complete, and then come out with some say aggregate number or say rating, which will give us some idea about how much you really like something, how much you are really motivated to something, how much you think is the competence of a person, and such kind of variables which can't be really measured directly, which are measured through asking set of questions, is what we call as a construct or latent construct. And I would give an example like we go to a market and we have to purchase a shirt, and we just give a number, and that number is basically not a direct measurement of something. Let us say we ask for a shirt with a 44 number or a 42 number or a 40 number. What does it really mean? It means summation of a kind of a union of different kinds of say dimensions, that is the measurement of the arm, measurement of the collar, measurement of the waist. So there are 4-5 measurements in which go into a particular number, which is called, let us say 44 or 42 or the shirt number, and which really you are asking for, and this kind of a number which really represents lot other measurements together, but essentially is the information under investigation, and we want that information is something called a construct, and which will be very, very important as we really proceed in the marketing research, because you will find lot many times we confront this concept of constructs when we are measuring certain things or investigating certain things in the marketing research. And marketing research designs, as we are talking about, is once we have these constructs, we have some idea about the variables that are important in the whole this our marketing research process. What we got to really figure out is our audience, who we got to really investigate, where we got to really get data from. So this particular area or the set of audience are the subjects that we are trying to look at to investigate is called the population. And the population, every part of the population may not be really accessible, which we can really investigate, and it is very costly also. So what we do is we take a part of that population who we call a sample. Now between sample and the population, the theoretical population, we have something which is called sampling frame. And the sampling frame is something which is like, let us say we want to investigate about the people of a particular state. Is very quite difficult to really pick a sample from the whole population of that particular state. So what we will do is we will have access to some kind of a telephone directory, some kind of a revenue record, which will help us to really pick a part of proportion of the whole population, which we call as the sampling frame. So between population and then we have a sampling frame, and we have finally the sample, which is taken up from the sample taken from the sampling frame. And the sample can be random, and sometimes it can be judgmental, it can be convenience sampling, depending on like what sort of method are we using and what we want to really use this sample for. Because the more the sample is random, it represents every aspect of the population, the more you can really generalize the sample findings for the entire population. You can generalize the outcome for the entire population. So it is very important and advantageous to really make a quite random based sample of the population. At the same time, it is sometimes necessary in certain kind of designs that each part of the population, like you are doing a study across males and females, you are doing a study across different states of the country. Let us say we are doing an investigation for 5 states, then each state has to be represented well in the sample. So when we are doing random sampling, we have to really make sure that these different states or these different genders or these different groups are well represented in the sample. And we call these different groups in the total sample as the strata. That means the strata has to be well represented in the final sample. And as I was talking in the beginning, that your whole approach is dependent on like what we are investigating, how much confident we are, and also how much is the knowledge already available about that particular domain or that particular problem or that particular phenomena. Like I was talking about, like the exploratory research, if the situation you need to really investigate more, you need to know more about the dimensions, there is not much of knowledge available about that area, you possibly do an exploratory research. But the other part, the other approach for the research design could be a conclusive research design, which basically means that there is some information available over there. There are a lot of dimensions which have been already explored, and you want to really have the status of those particular dimensions with regard to your particular problem, and we call it descriptive research. And then of course the causal research, where you are trying to look into the linkages and the effects across the dimensions that are there in that particular domain. So there are these differences between the exploratory research and the conclusive research, and like the objective in the case of exploratory research is provide more insight and understanding, and in case of conclusive research it is to test specific hypotheses and examine relationships, as we are talking, same thing. And in case of findings, the exploratory is tentative, and in case of conclusive it is conclusive. What it really means is that after even doing exploratory studies, we basically come out mostly with the kind of say dimensions that are there. We come out with the kind of tools that could be appropriate for the kind of say area that we are investigating, and then finally get into the conclusive kind of design, where we take those particular variables, dimensions, methods, skills that we came out at the time of say exploratory study, and can then use it better and in a much refined way doing the conclusive study. So the uses of exploratory research is to formulate a problem and define a problem more precisely, identify alternative courses of action, develop hypotheses, isolate key variables and relations for further examination, gain insights for further developing an approach to the problem, establishing priorities for further research. So that is, as I was saying, like we don't have much idea about the area, we don't have much about the idea about the kind of questions that could be really asked. So we are generating everything, we are creating, we are working from the scratch, we are looking into the possibilities that can be really explored in that particular area. While in case of exploratory research, the methods that are used is normally survey of experts, pilot surveys, secondary data analyzed in a qualitative way, and qualitative research. Why qualitative research could be a question that could be really asked, why we really prefer a qualitative research? Because when we are doing exploratory research, we don't have much idea about the situation. We don't have really established scales or the measurements in that particular domain. Now, if we go with very close-ended questions, very fixed kind of say very structured questions, we give little scope for the audience to really speak about that particular phenomena, speak about the incidents in that particular domain, and we may not really get to the wider scope, we may not really get much insight into the issue. So that is why if we follow a qualitative approach, we basically get much deeper into the issue, we get much deeper into the phenomena, we have a quite an open mind about the whole situation, we can explore it better, we can really scope up the whole situation and know more about that particular area. And sometimes we do pilot surveys to really explore things further, and we also resort to the secondary data analysis. And Then the use of descriptive research is a part of the conclusive research that I was talking about, is to describe the characteristics of relevant groups such as consumers, salespeople, organizations, market areas. Is just an example of descriptive research. Descriptive research, as I was talking in the case of the retail outlet that we were, retail chain that we investigated some years before, is what are the sales of different companies, different retail chains in Delhi and in the adjoining states, in terms of the market share, what different categories are selling in different regions of say Delhi, what is the profile of the customers in different places, how has the profile changed over a period of time. All this is basically we are capturing the information that is there, and we want to really put it in a format and the shape, so that we get more idea about the situation, more idea about the decision domain, and to help us take a better decision. That is the idea. So these examples are helpful as long as they are done with the help of proper data, proper validated data, which is taken through well established methods, well established say measurement techniques, and the outcome is understood by the user. Like we may have information about say retail outlets, but the person who is taking a decision has to really work out some scheme for the consumers, has to work out something for, let us say, for the salespeople. And if our information doesn't really suit the kind of decision that we are really taking, then there is an issue, then this is a worthless exercise. So what I am trying to say is that what information we get, at what level of aggregation we get that information is quite important in terms of its compatibility for the kind of decision we got to really take. And as long as the descriptive research and the methods that are used there, we have surveys, we do panel studies, we sometimes observe the situations and understand the status of a situation. Like I will give you a case of an operations study. Some people may like to understand the existing processes in organizations, to understand how the quality is managed, how supply chains are managed, how inventory levels are kept leaner in certain automobile companies. A person may go and visit certain automobile companies and see how they really do various things at the shop floor, how they measure the quality, what sort of standards they follow, and what sort of defections and defectives are there in different departments and different across different companies. So this is something that we are trying to capture based on the observation. And similarly, as I was telling, there are other methods. You can one can go for surveys, one can go for panels, and one can resort to the secondary data analysis as well. And when we are talking about getting the data, we can do it in different ways. We can take a shot of the entire, say our area of study at a point of time, which is called cross-sectional data, or we can do it over a period of time, which is called longitudinal data. And sometimes if we use the same audience over a period of time and try to collect data about that, like in clinical trials, same people are used over a period of time, they are administered say different molecules and watched over a period of time, and that kind of an analysis and that kind of a model would be called, they are actually a panel. But sometimes what happens is you may not have really panel available all across over a period of time. It is quite difficult and costly also. So what happens is there is a different method that is used, which is called a cohort method. In cohort method, let us say we want to really see how different people from a particular batch in a college progressed over a period of time, let us say from the 1980 batch of Sri Ram College of Commerce. So what would be a cohort like? Let us say we take a sample of 40 students, we will take 90-80 batch, we will take 40 students, we will watch them over a period of time, but it is quite possible at each point of time same students may not be really available to us. So what we have the flexibility that we can take another say some other students from the same batch, but they should be 1980 batch. So, what we are trying to really do is we are basically assuming that the attributes of that particular batch across the whole group is same, irrespective of the person who we are really picking up. But in case of the panel, we do not change the audience, we continue with the same audience across the time intervals. So, that is what we are talking about, and cross-sectional, and we have longitudinal. And now the differences in terms of the advantages we have between cross-sectional and the longitudinal design is we can detect a change in a longitudinal design with much clarity and much with more validity, because we are looking at over a period of time. Because quite important in any kind of a change, it is important that we know what has happened before and what is happening after. So, before and after scenario is only visible in case of a longitudinal design. Let us say the kind of eating habits, how does it really affect a person. One can really have a good longitudinal design and see the effects before and after. But in case of a cross-sectional design, it may be quite difficult to really validate that thing, or it is not really that robust a method as longitudinal design. People conduct even cross-sectional studies to do this kind of an analysis, but to really achieve much validity and say confidence in the results, longitudinal designs are much better. And similarly, large amount of data collection, longitudinal designs, it is possible because we are doing it over a period of time, more accurate. But at the same time, cross-sectional design has an ability to give you much more representative sampling, because we are doing it just at one point of time, and the response bias is lesser, which we will talk later. In case of cross-sectional data, and this could be a problem because in longitudinal what happens is actually over time people become much more educated and intelligent about the kind of whole survey. So, whenever they are responding, they become slightly conscious of the whole thing, and the way they respond, the way they have responded earlier has an influence on the subsequent responses of theirs to the questions that you are going to ask subsequently. So, cross-sectional data may not show change, like there is an example: brand purchase brand ABC, and the time periods: brand period 1 survey, period 2 survey, 20, 30, 200, 300, 500, and period 2 survey, 200, 300, 500. And if you now see over a period of time, there is no change, but if you see at a point of time, you possibly get misled by the whole figures. And talking about the causal research, so we talked about the exploratory research, which is meant to really explore things, know things much better, get more insight into the variable. Then we talked about the descriptive research, is going to get to status of the phenomena, situation, population, and data, and knowing it much better. But and the third approach, the causal research, is essentially about knowing the linkages between the different dimensions, variables, what causes what, and it helps us to really predict things at certain times, because if we are able to really understand that there are certain variables which could be a possible cause for the another variable, which is called a dependent variable, which helps a marketing decision maker to take certain decisions. Tomorrow when we are going to do an example in the marketing research, then these things, whatever we discussed today in terms of the theory, would really be much more easier to understand. Otherwise, whatever we are saying looks like, okay, this is a theory, but let us see in the practice how it really helps us. So, all these things will come gradually in the problem that we will handle tomorrow. But before we really get into tomorrow's thing, one more thing that I would like to cover today is the kind of data that we really capture handling the marketing research or any kind of research that we are talking about is there are 4 types of data that are there that we got to really handle and in terms of the measurement. So, the first type of data that is there is called a nominal data. The nominal data is a kind of data which is a data that is a number that is assigned to something which is not actually the measurement of the actual numerical strength of that particular variable. Like let us say the direction or the location of a particular place, north, south, east, west. We may assign a number to a particular person who is come from different regions of the country, but number 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't mean that it has some value. 4 doesn't mean 4. 4 doesn't mean 4 means possibly south and 1 means north, or 2 means east and 3 means west. So, these are numbers which are assigned which are called nominal numbers, is a way of measuring certain things which cannot be assigned a real numeric measure. Similarly, there are other variables which are which can be measured with the help of nominal variables, but which can be also given some order. Let us say we have to measure the color preferences, we have to measure liking something. We can ask some person how much you really like a person on a particular scale. You may really like somebody very much, you may like very least. You may have a neutral kind of an liking for something. Similarly, you can really grade the colors, but you can translate these likings into certain numbers. Let us say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 means that how much agreement do I have with the kind of statement that I make. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not actually a number in the real sense. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 5 is a number that I have assigned which can be just given an order. That means 1 is no agreement and 5 is complete agreement and 3 is a neutral kind of an acceptance for the agreement. But 5 minus 4 doesn't mean 1 in fact. 5 is basically level of strength which is more than the 4, and 4 is more stronger than 3. So these numbers only give a value for capturing something, putting into the database. Apart from that, it gives an order to the agreement, liking, or the attitude we have towards something, and this kind of a variable is called ordinal data. Like we give ranks, you see a lot of ranks being given to say players. Fair play ranks, or you have say ranks for management institutes, you have ranks for the universities, you have ranks for colleges. So how well those ranks are arrived at, that's a separate thing, what is the methodology that is used, but as long as ranks are concerned, they are ordinal numbers. And then there are numeric measures which are used to really measure something. So if we measure a particular variable, either we assign a nominal variable, nominal measurement to that, which cannot be ordered, which is just a number which is assigned to really count it. And second one is ordinal, which gives it an order also apart from assigning a number to it, but it can't be really calculated using any mathematical function like addition, subtraction, division, anything. Apart from that, there are 2 other numeric measurements of the variables which are called interval and ratio scales. Interval is ratio or numeric measurements of the variables. Ratio is a complete numeric measurement like height, like weight, like how we really measure the profits, how we measure sales in a day. These are all ratio where the 0 is real and the measurement is numeric. Apart from that, there is an interval which is taken alongside with the ratio scales, is also a numeric measure, but the 0 is not real, like the temperature. Temperature, if a 0 temperature doesn't mean actually a 0 temperature, it means that in terms of the scale that has been used, the centigrade temperature, the Fahrenheit temperature, in that scale the 0 is arbitrary 0, and that 0 is being used as a scale in the interval system. Similarly, in the time scale, like you have time from 0 to 12 o'clock. 0 o'clock doesn't mean actually 0 o'clock. 0 o'clock is an arbitrary 0 in the time scale, and this is called interval scale. And these four are very important. These are the four different types of say measurements used to scale and measure data, which will be taken up when we do and take up a example and work out with the help of certain methods. Then understanding these four different scales is quite important, and it has to be, any measurement has to be compatible with the method that we are really using. Thank you.
So, well friend, Dr. Wali has explained the things very clearly. I hope you must have understood the concept and what are the methods and what are the concepts related to that research design and data analysis and all that. So I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. O.P. Wali for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.